Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kiernan Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
Ryan, I am so excited. This is a first ever for us today.
It's our first interview?
It's what? I mean, I know you're saying it as a question because I did it and you didn't. But yes, it's the first interview. We thought, 11th episode, the big 1-1. It's time. Let's bring on somebody else. They're getting tired of listening to us. So today, I interview writer Mark Adams about his great book. It's called Tip of the Iceberg, My 3,000-Mile Journey Around Wild Alaska, The Last Great Frontier. Some of that was subtitle, just because I realize now that when you say it in full, feels like a journey just to get through it.
You can probably find it if you look through My 3,000-Mile Journey Around Wild Alaska. You don't need that Last Great Frontier.
You can look Tip of the Iceberg.
Oh my, it's like 3 titles. Okay, I got you. Now, didn't Mark also write the book on Peru?
Yeah, he wrote Turn Right at Machu Picchu, Rediscovering the Lost City One Step at a Time. And if you go to Peru from the United States, you will have seen this book because every passenger is required to show it as they board a flight. Every American has to have a copy of this book before they visit Machu Picchu.
This is like the book to read. You've talked about it on the pod before.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's fantastic. It was huge. It got this big New York Times article. And what he does is he likes to go through historical research and find an expedition that maybe you and I don't know about. And he learns everything about it. He goes to a wild place, and then he recreates it in today and meets tons of characters, and you get a great dose of excitement and adventure and history. So it's like so up our alley.
We should do that for the Teddy Roosevelt exhibition. That was
you want to go to the River of Doubt in the Amazon?
That would be fun. And I think that would be a good episode of the pod if you and I went down.
Okay, if we do that, that's going to be like a year of the pod. It'll be you emaciated in my arms saying, "Why did we do this?" Me going, "We're still at the airport, Ryan."
Where did Teddy actually go in his trip?
Well, when Teddy ran against Taft in 1912 to try to recapture the presidency, and he lost, he was kind of in shock that America wouldn't elect him again. And so he said, I just need to leave the United States. And he and his son, and then this giant brigade, went to map an uncharted river in Brazil, and it's a tributary to the Amazon River. And it nearly killed him. It nearly killed his son. They said when he came back, he had lost so much weight that people didn't recognize him. It was, mosquitoes and native peoples who were hostile to the adventurers. It was boats being dashed apart on rocks. It was, as I'm saying it, I kind of like your idea that we should go back and create this.
That is a compelling episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I think. Okay. Again, we can hardly afford to run these mics. Okay, so if we're doing a full expedition, this is going to have to be a GoFundMe.
Oh, all right. Patreon. Yeah.
Send Ryan and Kiernan into the unknown. Perhaps, maybe we can send our record. Somebody thousands of years from now will find this lone laptop next to 2 emaciated skeletons. Oh, wow, you liked that one. Well, hopefully something that people will enjoy as much as you enjoyed that vision of my future skeleton in death is our future tagline. Ryan, we are getting very close to the end of this.
Yeah, we are getting very, very close. I mean, I brought my solid B game when I went away.
Weeks and weeks.
Yeah, and no, this week. This week is my solid B game.
Wait, no. See, okay, this week, though, is a week you have vowed that you are actually going to pitch 3 taglines that you came up with yourself. You didn't use a generator. You didn't use a freelancer. You didn't go to Pinterest or Twitter. You came up with every word of these.
Every single word of these is a Ryan original. And I think that we've got 3 of the best ever presented.
All right. So, another important piece of this is our last week. Now, that's not to say something brilliant could occur to us from this to next week. I don't know. But Christmas is our big reveal.
Yeah, we have promised our listeners that the very first thing they will get when they open up their presents on Christmas Day will be this new tagline.
Absolutely. They're gonna jump out of their beds and they're gonna listen for hooves on the roof to make sure that they're not interrupting Santa. Then they gotta scamper down in their PJs, the one piece, and they find a stocking there with their name on it, and they reach it, they dig through the stocking, take out the candy canes, take out the batteries for whatever toys they're gonna get, and if they reach way down in that stocking, they feel something down there, they pull it up, it's gonna be just a perfect tagline for Out of Office. That's our Christmas gift to the listener.
Skip church, curl up with your family, and listen to the special Christmas episode of Out of Office.
So I definitely agree with the curling up. Just do it after church. It's still worth going to church to celebrate the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Those new earbuds that people can't really see, you could listen during church. Actually.
Oh, okay. I would settle for one earbud in and one earbud out. So you get a little church, you get a little comedy tagline. Fantastic.
Perfect.
All right, I am ready, Ryan. I'm going to sit back, let you do the heavy lifting here.
Out of Office, a travel podcast. Close your eyes and escape.
Close your eyes and escape.
And escape.
It sounds to me like a meditation app.
Yeah, but you're closing your eyes and you're thinking about travel and all the travel stories that we're telling you. And it is, the danger, I think, is that people are listening while they're driving.
Yeah, no, right.
Yeah.
Or, usually I'm walking down the street when I'm listening to podcasts.
So maybe you need to, but it's a metaphor. It doesn't mean you have to actually close your eyes. It could be keep your eyes open and look at the Excel document and escape.
And pray for the sweet escape of death. What if we split the difference and we say, close one eye and escape, but keep the other eye on what you're doing?
Out of Office, a travel podcast. Close one eye and escape while keeping the other eye on what you're doing.
Yeah, that's good.
It's not as good. It's not as good.
No, but it has a little piece of you and a little piece of me, and I think that's what makes the magic.
Well, it does. It does. Well, let's think about that.
Okay, and I hope these all don't have escape in it. We already did an escape week. So
there's not that many words. You got to give me a break here.
That's not true.
Think different is one of the great taglines.
There's
actually got 2 words in it.
There's actually a lot of words out in the world. So there better not be journey, escape. Anyway, I'm ready to hear it. Hit me.
Out of Office, a travel podcast. Know where you're going.
Well, of course they're going to know where they're going.
No, but they know where they're going. They're going to listen to this podcast, and then they're going to have a deeper understanding of Peru or of Alaska, and they're going to really know. What if it's not?
Oh, I see. Because you're saying by being a constant listener, you now know where you're going. You don't just kind of hop on a plane and get there. You're going to appreciate it. Exactly. You're going to have substance.
Appreciate it. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I like this one because it's sort of the flip side of this seat taken. That one doesn't really mean much. And it, it's kind of sharp and funny. Whereas yours, it's kind of boring, but it captures the mission of the podcast.
Right. Folks know what we're trying to accomplish here. And we're trying to inform, educate, and inspire wanderlust and our listeners.
Know where you're going. Is that right? That's right?
That's right.
Know where you've been, know where you are, know where you're going.
Exactly. See, I knew so far. I think I'm really excited about that.
I feel good enough about it to put it in the maybe.
Oh, my third one's gonna be a game changer, I think, because it combines like other themes that we've talked about, but it perfects something that you brought to the table.
Oh, so it's a little bit of me, a little bit of you. It's like our child.
Months ago. Exactly.
Much like this podcast itself. All right. You've set high expectations sky high. This is the last one that's going to be in contention publicly on air. So this got to be a grand slam. That's baseball. That's a baseball term.
So today I was getting some work done at Demi Mode, my favorite coffee shop here in Bushwick. And it came to me out of the blue, Out of Office, a travel podcast, adventures in your ears.
Oh, it sounds so gross.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it
That's not
sounds like
literal.
somebody's been shrunken down and has to adventure
no, it
through your
doesn't.
ear like some sort of sick spelunking adventure.
It sounds like a knight, like the Count of Monte Cristo, like whispering adventures in your ear. Like it's like the Knights of the Round Table. It's evocative of childhood and excitement and discovery. I think it's
So here's the thing. I love In Your Ear. I like anything to do with the ears. I'm the one that pitched Oral Escape.
This was inspired by Oral Escape.
That's why I do like it, because it does come from both of us. Adventures in Your Ear, right? And
Adventures
it's kind of like,
in your ears. It could be adventure in your ear.
Yeah, I think in your ear, singular. Because I think by saying ears, that's what made me think it was a journey. Like, you're going to be
your ears.
You're going to be dropped off in the right ear, and then you have to venture through and to exit on the other
it's
side.
Like a magic school bus sort of. No.
I mean, that's really a great follow-up to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Right.
That's a modern-day sequel waiting to be written.
I think it has possibility.
Do you remember that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids actually did have a sequel, and it was called Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, and it was about a baby that they had blown up to enormous size?
Do you remember in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids how sad it was when the aunt dies?
Yes, I do remember that very much.
Spoiler alert, I know, but
sorry everybody. Oh, spoiler alert. I mean, we can't afford to go back and edit spoiler alert in, but spoiler alert retroactive. No, but what I always thought with Honey, I Blew Up the Kid was that they had to spend a day sitting there going, is there any way that doesn't make it sound like we're blowing up kids?
I know that they put a lot of thought into it. Like, I think that a day might have been the length of the whole.
Of course they did.
It was like direct to video. Is Rick Moranis even in that one?
No, it was not direct to video. Rick Moranis was definitely in that one. Honey, we blew up the kids.
So and it really should have canon. It's part of the canon.
It is. It's part of the canon of that huge universe of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It should be I Enlarged the Child. But anyway. Listen, Adventures in Your Ear, absolutely, this is on the list. This is high up on the maybe, I would say.
I'm glad that you liked it so much.
Yeah.
I was nervous about it. I haven't had a client pitch in a while with such a difficult client. And
what I like about it, too, is that every episode is an adventure. It's a new adventure. And I think that's part of the fun. We're trying to always come up with new, exciting topics that, we have a particular take on. That's an adventure.
Hey, I want to cut real back to 1997 because you forgot that Disney produced a third film.
No, I actually
Honey,
know
we
it.
Shrunk
Honey,
Ourselves.
We Shrunk Ourselves. Yes, I know it.
That was direct to video.
Rick Moranis was not in that one.
That is not true. He was the only returning actor to be in that film. Everyone else refused. And Rick Moranis is like, direct to video? I am there.
I mean, listen, that's one of the great adventure tales of our time. So if we could ever have Rick Moranis on, maybe after we do this Mark Adams interview, we see what Rick Moranis is up to.
This time, the parents are shrunk and need to be rescued by their kids.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah?
And it's them and the next door neighbors get shrunk, right?
Oh, it doesn't say in the Wikipedia.
That's
somebody needs to spend some more time blowing out the plots of these.
Honey,
I Shrunk.
Honey, we blew out our Wikipedia entry about the Shrunk the Kids movies.
Yeah, there was a TV show that played 66 episodes. How do you keep that going for so long?
But it was every time he had a new crazy invention.
Gotcha.
So few times it was the shrink ray, but other times it was just madcap silliness. But it didn't star Rick Moranis. It was with somebody named Peter or something.
It ran a decade.
Yeah, and what's the main actor's name?
Peter? What is this world we live in? Peter Scolari.
Scolari, that's right, Peter Scolari.
Yeah. Oh, he looks like a Rick Moranis type.
I thought you might be impressed that I remembered the Peter part, but I guess not.
Yeah, Peter.
All right. Well, listen, I think we've sent it out in a great way. You also positioned the three in a really great way. You finished with your strongest one. I really appreciate that. So I think it's time we turn to my interview with writer Mark Adams about his book Tip the Iceberg, which is a stunning adventure tale through the wilds of Alaska. Actually, Ryan, you know what it is?
What is it?
It's an adventure in your ear.
An adventure in your ear.
Let's tell the cabin crew, take off.
Cabin crew? Time to take off.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
So I am excited to bring on our very first guest. Thank you so much for generously offering your time. Today we have author of Tip of the Iceberg, My 3,000-Mile Journey Around Wild Alaska, The Last Great American Frontier, Mark Adams. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Kiernan, how you doing?
Now, because Alaska is so enormous, why don't you give us a lead-in, tell us, what the trip was that you took and how you came to plan it.
Yeah, so about 3 years ago, I was in Seattle in Pioneer Square, which people who know Seattle will know is a great place to pick up vaping supplies, but not necessarily a great scenic location where you might expect to run into a national park ranger. But that's exactly what I did. There's a guy in the Smokey Bear hat there standing beneath a totem pole. And I was like, what is this totem pole? And he said, oh, that is a replica of a totem pole that some city fathers of Seattle went up to Alaska and stole. And they were inspired by this thing called the Harriman Expedition in 1899, which is very famous. And, it's kind of my job to be up on great expeditions in American history, but I had never heard of this. So he started talking about it. I said, yeah, Edward Harriman, the railroad tycoon, in 1898, he had just taken over the Union Pacific Railroad, spent the entire summer going over every inch of track, sitting on the front of an engine, and essentially exhausted himself. And his doctor said, you've got to take next summer off. So what Harriman did was say, okay, well, it's become kind of popular to take steamship cruises up to the Inside Passage of Alaska. And he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to refit one of my company steamships as a gigantic 200-foot long luxury yacht. And because I'm Edward Harriman, I am going to invite along 24 of America's greatest naturalists, artists, writers, and just take them all up to Alaska for a couple months, and they can make whatever scientific discoveries they want to. And in the other hours of the day, they can entertain my children and my family and our guests. So, he decides to do this in March. And by Memorial Day, 1899, he's got his team together, and he's got this incredible group, including guys like John Muir, George Bird Grinnell, the founder of the Audubon Society and the editor of America's #1 outdoor magazine. You've got Hart Merriam, who is the head of what later became the U.S. Biological Survey. You've got John Burroughs, who is the most popular nature writer in America at the time, who'd never been west of the Mississippi. Best friends with Teddy Roosevelt, who was then the governor of New York.
I mean, this is basically the Super Friends gathering together. It's like if you got Luke Skywalker, Captain Kirk, Doctor Who, Flash Gordon. Though I as a Teddy devotee, a Ted head as we call ourselves, feel like it's as if you left Superman out.
Well, I think Superman had work at the Daily Planet that day.
Yeah. Now, how did you go about, I mean, obviously there's a huge amount of material about each and every one of these expedition members. I think one thing I love about the book is that you do a great job of humanizing these characters. And so why don't you tell me a little bit about, learning the individual personalities and what you came to know about some of them?
Well, of course, first there's Harriman. He went and visited Hart Merriam, who was incredibly well connected in D.C., in his office, and basically said, look, get every great scientist in America right now, including John Muir and John Burroughs, et cetera, William Dahl, famous as the dean of Alaska explorers, and,
And the namesake for the Dahl sheep.
For the Dahl sheep and the Dahl porpoise, and there's one other as well, which is escaping me right now, but you go up to Alaska and you look at a map and there's Dahl this, Dahl that, Dahl River, Dahl Island.
Yeah.
It was terra incognita at the time. It was a blank space, and he, could just put his name on here. The first place they went to in Alaska was Annette Island, which is at the very southern end of the panhandle there. Dahl named it after his wife, so that's the kind of impact that Dahl had on Alaska. But, Harriman was able to put this thing together overnight because he was so well organized, so wealthy, and so convincing. So then you've got Muir, who is, of course, like the arch druid of American ecology. He just put together the Sierra Club with some, peers of his out in San Francisco a few years earlier. He's just getting into the point where he's, writing about national parks and his most famous works that had such a huge influence on Teddy Roosevelt and the foundation of what we now know as the National Park Service. And Muir is essentially responsible for Inside Passage cruising as we know it now. 1 million people go up through the Inside Passage on tour boats, cruise ships that can hold 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people. Most of that can be traced right back to a series of articles that Muir wrote in 1879 and 1880 that made this place sound like this, icy wonderland filled with wildlife and glaciers. And, that was Muir's gift.
And Muir, I didn't have such a sense before your book about, the man was completely fearless and he was ready to just head out into unknown wilderness with, next to no preparation, next to no gear and very little plan.
Well, and he lived for years as, essentially like what we would now call a dirtbagger. He had a little satchel with a change of underwear and a notebook and a pencil. And, that was about it. He didn't have to eat much. He would just, he walked from Indiana to Florida before he ever made it out to California. And he's just like, I'm going to go out and check out as much nature as I can. Eventually, right after, I think it was right between his first and second trips to Alaska in 1879, 1880, he gets married. He marries a very wealthy the daughter of a very wealthy fruit farmer and essentially inherits the fruit farm. So, you go from John Muir, penniless dirtbagger, to John Muir, still great adventurer, but now he's loaded. John Muir took like a decade off before he went on the Harriman expedition to get that fruit farm up and running. And he was quite a wealthy man by that time, but he had not lost his sense of adventure. And that's how Harriman was able to get him to come on the trip, because he was like, I don't like, a rich guy in his private boat. I'm not sure how I feel about this. And Harriman told Miriam to tell Muir, hey, we're going to go places that even you have never been in Alaska.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the boat? Because it's not like they were roughing it.
No, not at all. It was a Harriman Company steamship, and he essentially had it rebuilt so that it had, not individual, but shared cabins, two scientists to a cabin. It had this gigantic saloon with a piano and a private library and, like a I don't know what you call it, a light box, I guess, where you could show slides of photographs that were taken that day so that, everybody could give lectures at the end of the day as a form of entertainment. It was very comfortable living. There was a set menu every day. Some of these guys had been on, early American expeditions like those of John Wesley Powell, where, they're living on water and hardtack for weeks at a time. And suddenly it's like, do you want the capon or do you want the bluefish for dinner? They were, it was a little bit of a culture shock, but they seemed to get used to it very quickly.
And I assume that that's fairly similar to the circumstances you found yourself in. So why don't you lead us through what exactly the route was that this traced along Alaska and how exactly you got around it?
So both Harriman and myself started in Seattle. You go up the coast of British Columbia through the islands of the Inside Passage, what you would take on a standard cruise these days, which usually goes from Ketchikan in the far south of the Panhandle up to Skagway in the far north of the Panhandle. And then I stopped in Glacier Bay, Sitka, Juneau, a few other places, and then headed west along the southern shore of Alaska there, past where Anchorage and Homer are, and then out to the Aleutian Islands, to Dutch Harbor, and then up to Nome. And that was pretty much where they stopped. I mean, they retraced the whole route and came back in 1899, but I was exhausted by then and flew out of Nome.
But it's basically carving that arc all along the bottom of the state.
Yeah, you're tracing everything from the tip of the Panhandle up out to the start of the tusk that is the Aleutian Islands.
And were you able to get the Elder out of mothballs, fire it up again, and take your own team of scientists and luminaries?
Well, the nice thing, and nice depending on your point of view, about getting around Alaska is there aren't a lot of roads. There are 4 times as many miles of roads in Louisiana as there are in all of Alaska, which is, and Alaska is as big as Texas, Montana, and California combined, with enough room left over for a couple small states. And the easiest way to get around is still by water. It's always been by water. And what they have is a thing called the Alaska Marine Ferry, which will go from town to town to town. And that's how a lot of people can move their cars around. It's how people move, large goods. I took the Marine Ferry starting in a town called Bellingham, just north of Seattle. And as we were loading on, people were bringing, giant boxes of provisions and pickup trucks and, camper vans just stuffed to the gills with, stuff from Walmart and Costco. And some people were bringing, like a bulldozer that was going out to the Aleutian Islands. And, this is the way that if you have a big package or, a large family, you can move it around Alaska from town to town, because there's only a handful of places that can be reached by roads.
Yeah, and this is basically the commuter rail of Alaska. I mean, it doesn't sound like there was, like, you didn't have a private cabin, right?
Well, I did for the first couple days. Okay. And then after that, sort of catch as catch can. There were times when I was sleeping out on the deck. There were times when, I was sleeping on the floor of the viewing lounge. A lot of people, what they do is they'll get a tent and like duct tape it out to the deck.
And so you got a great sense of the types of people who either stay in Alaska or end up in Alaska, especially traveling with them by these means. So give us a sense of who lives in Alaska, for those of us that have only spent a little bit of time there, or for whom it's just kind of this mysterious state to the north.
Yeah, well, Alaska is a lot like Florida in that many, if not most, of its residents start out somewhere else. And, a friend of mine who grew up in Alaska described it to me as, you've got 3 kinds of people in Alaska. You've got the natives who've been there, since time immemorial. You've got the people who've come there running to something like, a job in a fish cannery, that you used to hear about when we were in college. It's like, you can make, $1,500 a week working in a salmon cannery, or working on the Alaska pipeline back in the 70s. And then there are a lot of people, sometimes known as end of the roaders, who are running away from something like a bad divorce or fluoridated water. And so those are often the most interesting people you'll meet in Alaska. And in Yakutat, speaking of Yakutat, one of the people I met was a park ranger named Jim Capra. And he was talking to me about the area and how isolated it was and how he grew up in LA. And I was like, Capra, you're not related to Frank Capra, the movie director, are you? He's like, yeah, that was my grandfather. And I really didn't want to be in the family business. So I got as far away as I possibly could. And, look around you here on a map that you can't get much further away from Los Angeles than we are right now.
And what was your sense of how the people of Alaska feel about the government? I know, they're kind of famously anti-government, questioning of authority. How does that play out in their daily life or in your conversations with them?
Well, there is a very Alaska type of personality. Not everybody, but you'll definitely a predominant personality that feels like, Alaska is the last bastion of the Old West, and you go out there so you can live independently, and you're living off the land, and you're shooting caribou, and you're fishing your salmon, and the government should stay out of your business, and what's the term they use? The federal overreach is a term you hear about there a lot. It's like Washington, because Washington owns so much of Alaska because of various laws that were passed over the years. They own it as BLM land or national parks. So you'll hear a lot of federal overreach, stay out of our jurisdiction, states' rights, blah blah blah. At the same time, per capita, Alaska receives more aid than any other state in the union. I think it's like they receive depending on what numbers you use, either $2.50, $3, or $5 for every dollar they send back in taxes to Washington.
Right.
And a lot of that is because there's military land, because there is all this national land there, and it has to be administrated by rangers and such. And at the same time, they don't pay any state tax because of all the oil money, the revenues from the oil money, and they do receive a check every year from what's called the permanent fund. And, it's in a good year, that check, every man, woman, and child gets between $1,000 and $2,000, Yeah. And when I went up there in 2016, the budget had collapsed because the price of oil had fallen under $40 a barrel. And the Alaska state budget, much like the budget of Venezuela, is predicated on oil more at like $120 a barrel. There's Alaska in a lot of ways is the most socialist state in America. There's great, education and medical care, and they're flying nurse practitioners and dentists around all these small towns so that everybody's taken care of. And it's all paid for with the oil money. But in 2016, they were like, well, we got to start making some cuts to the budget. This is a $6.5 billion budget, and we've got a $5 billion deficit, essentially, is what they were up against. And they're like, well, maybe we should try to take some of that permanent fund money, that pays for the $1,000 or $2,000 checks. And oh my God, the political fallout from that was like, don't you dare,
So speaking of the sort of untapped, incredible amounts of nature there, what is the relationship that you had that Alaskans have with the wildlife directly around them?
Well, it's much, much closer than anywhere else in the United States, really. I mean, there might be parts of like rural Montana or northern Maine where it's similar, but the big thing in Alaska, especially in the summer, is bears. Mm-hmm. The bears are everywhere. And if you live in Alaska, you know how to deal with bears. It's like, don't ever run away from a bear because a bear is going to think you're prey. But then you have to differentiate between, the behavior of what they call a brown bear and the behavior of a black bear, because they're very different. It's like, a brown bear might attack you, because it feels threatened, especially if it's a sow with new cubs. But a black bear, if it attacks you, it's probably going to try to eat you.
Yeah. Or as they call it in the training, when it begins feeding on you.
Yeah, exactly. When it begins feeding on you. And the problem is that, a black bear isn't necessarily the color of crude oil. A black bear can be like cinnamon colored, right. And there can be really dark brown bears. So, you're told to look for this distinctive hump on the back of the bear. And it's like, well, I have to wait for it to start, chewing on my skull before I can reach around and.
Oh, and that hump is a hunk of muscle perfectly designed to tear apart human flesh.
Exactly. He's probably going to be flexing it as it tears through my rib cage. But generally, if you know how to act around bears, which is to make a lot of noise and to not sneak up on them or anything like that, there isn't trouble. But, if you spend enough time in Alaska like I did, you'd meet people who'll be like, oh yeah, a guy who works in my office, he's got half of his face scratched off, or somebody no longer has the use of their arm, or it's almost normal to talk about someone who's been mauled by a bear. It's like a bad car accident.
Is there a difference between travel writing and straight journalism and not writing novels? I mean, how do you think about the type of writing you do?
Well, I did not train as a travel writer. And I think, right now in 2018, the term travel writer is used more for like a travel blogger who's writing about, the 10 hottest hotels in Miami right now.
Oh, you mean our next podcast?
Yeah, probably what I'm going to be writing next week so I can pay my mortgage. They want, like tips and lists and things like that. And people, they email me all the time. It's like, how do I do what you do? How do I, write a book about travels? And it's like, well, you're not writing about places. You're writing about people. You have to tell a story. You have to have, characters who change and grow throughout the course of a book. You have to move locations. Nobody wants to hear about the cross-country road trip you took after college, or the summer you spent on a Eurail pass, unless something crazy happens. If it changed your life somehow because you met this fascinating person, maybe then it's a story. But it's the same stuff that goes back to Aristotle. There has to be rising action, there has to be a climax, there has to be falling action, there has to be a resolution. So it's in a lot of ways not that different from writing a novel. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I think the mistake that a lot of people start out with when they try to do travel writing is, I did this and then I did this and then I did this and then I did this. And it's hard to understand that that's fascinating in your own head, but it's going to bore the pants off of anybody who has to read it. So just because you experienced it does not mean it's going to be good reading on the page. Just because you got a bunch of clicks on your Instagram feed does not mean people are going to be able to commit 8 to 10 hours of concentrated reading on what you did.
Yeah, and you spend a lot of time in your books. You kind of have a cast of characters from history. You have a cast of characters who you meet, your guides, your chance run-ins. In this book, the Alaskans that you meet in these small towns. And then you have your own journey through this. And so you're balancing lots of different narratives. I mean, that's one of my favorite parts of the book, is that there's a great variety of that rising action, falling action, because there's small stories and there's big stories.
Well, John McPhee, who wrote probably the great Alaska book called Coming into the Country, a book that's so good that even Alaskans like it, and they don't really like the opinions of outsiders. Although I'm very gratified to say that pretty much every Alaskan who's read my book has said, you pretty much nailed it. So he also wrote a book about nonfiction writing, in which he says what you have to understand about long-form nonfiction writing is it's all structure. It's not facts. It's not outlining. It's, how do you structure the piece? Is it A, B, C, B, A, D? Is it a circle? Is it a triangle? You have to sit down and plot out how the scenes are going to go so that you carry a reader along. And that's, it's harder to do than it looks when you're reading. There's an old saying, like, the easier the reading, the harder the writing. And that's, my books are designed to be, snackable, I guess you would say, so that, so someone tried to insult one of my books in a review once. They're like, it's, you read through it really quickly. It's hard to put down. I was like, yes, exactly. That's what I want. I want you to get to the end of the chapter and be like, all right, I'll just read one more. If I can make someone laugh every few pages, they're going to keep going, so that, there might be another laugh, or that crazy character might come back. Everything has to be, it's like Dickens writing his serials, everything has to be a little bit of a cliffhanger. And that's the hardest part to learn if you are going to do travel writing, is that structure.
The last question I have that I can't resist asking you while I have you is, what books have you thought about, gotten down the path of trying to plan, and then had to abandon for some reason or another? Or what books are you thinking about next?
It is my nightmare to get like 6 months into a book and be like, you know what, this is not the book for me. And it happens. I've known people who've gotten that far, which is why I'm very careful and take a long time to pick topics. But I've never actually gotten more than a few weeks into research and realized, there are a couple of books that I'm thinking about right now. One would involve elephants in Africa and maybe India as well. A lot of interesting things going on in Africa right now. Not just the science of how elephant societies are, how they're organized, but crazy stuff that people are doing to try to save the elephants, because the poachers are getting ever more sophisticated and ever more aggressive in trying to collect ivory. The other one is it involves Mount Kailash in Tibet, and then I would spend some time in Nepal and Kathmandu talking to people, and there would be an interesting element of the history of Buddhism in the West, and how this is connected to the idea of of Mount Kailash, where if you circle the mountain, you're forgiven a lifetime of sins.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. I think Tip of the Iceberg is an excellent Christmas gift. Not to ruin the surprise for all of my family, but they will all be receiving copies. So thanks for taking the time, and I hope you're having a wonderful holiday season.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan, last stop. So this is hell of a segment, this one. And this is where Ryan and I each talk about one thing this week that fed our wanderlust. What made us want to travel, put us in connection with that adventurous spirit that we embrace here on Out of Office. So, Ryan, do you have a good last stop this week?
So I've been reading Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, and it takes place in sort of the future where an empire is coming to an end, and the only thing they can do to stop the end of the world is to basically create a series of encyclopedias that will allow a future civilization to reboot faster.
Nothing more exciting for a novel than about writing encyclopedias. That sounds...
One of the early chapters is called The Encyclopedist, which is a really exciting name for a chapter.
Now, this is a trilogy, right?
It is a trilogy.
And are you on the first one?
I'm on I'm halfway through the second book.
Okay. Oh boy, right in the thick of it.
Yeah, but they're flying all around on in hyperspace very quickly.
Do they call it hyperspace?
They call it hyperspace when they do warp warp travel. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's been making me think about the possibility in my lifetime that I could have the opportunity to do a little space travel.
Absolutely. You got let's see, we got SpaceX.
SpaceX.
Is it called Blue Origins? Is that Jeff Bezos's space company?
Yeah, that makes sense. Blue Origins. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different sort of commercial space.
Blue Origin, singular.
I would hope they would have multiple origins.
No. You got to start with one origin. Maybe our children could have blue origins.
Well, I want to be able to go at least to like the moon atmosphere in my lifetime, which seems...
Seriously though, would you do space travel if you didn't have to pay the high cost and you were given a seat on one of these shuttles? Would you do it?
I famously can't handle like a child's ride at an amusement park, like a child's roller coaster that doesn't even like do anything. I can't handle. So I don't know if it would have to feel like the Delta to Boston. Like if it was any more stressful than the Delta flight to Boston, I'd probably pass.
I have a great idea for how I trick you into it. I can tell you it was just an immersive experience. It's a hyper realistic immersive experience.
Yeah.
$80 a ticket. Whoa. And you will be sitting in Long Island City the whole time. I feel like you'd be right on the subway there. You'd be first in line.
Right, and then I would have no idea I was actually in space. And I'm like, what an immersive experience that was.
Oh my God, that was almost as good as the 2 Alice in Wonderland ones I went to.
They could do it like the Apollo 13 ride. They could just bring you up really quick and bring you right back down again.
I mean, it's funny because for all the times that I poo-poo immersive experiences, I feel like we come up with pretty good ones. A space travel immersive experience is a really good idea.
Yeah, I've never done a space travel immersive experience. I've done a zombie war immersive experience. I've done.
I bet it was an emotional experience as well.
Surprisingly, it was pretty well acted. It was intense at times, but
it would be very fun if in that they took people from the party that you came with and made some of them into the zombies, so you get to see undead friends of yours.
So they didn't do friends, but there were people that we thought were good guys that ended up being part of this conspiracy to make us all into zombies. So we thought they were like just regular guests, but they were not. They were actors.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's a common trick these days.
Oh, in the immersive theater bag of tricks. Yeah.
So what is your plan for finishing these? You've obviously gone fairly fast if you're in the middle of 2. Or is it so engaging you're going to fly through?
No, the first one is definitely not engaging. It's all about the ideas of this foundation and the encyclopedist and the idea of what history is. And then he invents this new form of history called psychohistory, which is really like Nate Silver big data prediction. So it's not super exciting, but the second book is more of like a space cowboy sort of thing where there's like more action, sort of more entertaining.
Now, I thought you didn't really like sci-fi.
I don't. My friend Aaron, I'd heard Paul Krugman say that this was the greatest series on history he ever read, he didn't sound like he was being cheeky. And then my friend Aaron mentioned it to me, and so I decided, look, I'll give it a try. So, it's definitely not making me a sci-fi fan. I'm mostly like, why are they in space? Why I don't really care about these different planets. I get the metaphor.
My last stop this week is I went to a concert by an artist. He's called Dom Flemons. Have you ever heard of Dom Flemons?
Dom Flemons. No, I don't think I've heard of Dom.
Dom Flemons, he styles himself the American songster, which is sort of an old-timey word for a musician who plays lots of different types of music. So the way I discovered Dom Flemons, well, I didn't discover him, but the way I became familiar with his music was that Terry Gross had on the original band he was on. What? That's how I discovered him.
I just love that you and I only discover music in like kids go to the clubs or whatever. And
no. I was listening
Terry Gross had on.
Yeah. And the Carolina Chocolate Drops famously were resurrecting this lost body of music that was African-American jug band music. And it was super upbeat, really exciting, fun to listen to. Well, the band broke up and all the individuals went their separate ways. And Dom Flemons came out with his own album, and it's called Black Cowboys. And again, he dove into the archives of music and found this tradition that I certainly had never heard of. Apparently, 1 in every 4 cowboys that settled the Wild West was black.
Really?
Yeah. And so he sings the songs that he discovered in libraries and through extensive research. And then he wrote some honoring the tradition and celebrating some of the lives of the individual black cowboys. He's a super talented musician. He plays banjo, different types of guitar. He even has this special banjo that he had made for him that's modeled on early banjos from African Americans that's made out of a real gourd. And so he also plays percussion on these. It's called the name of the instrument is the bones, where you hold 2, they almost look like ribs in each hand, and you clicky, clacky.
Oh.
He even sells those as like a favor afterwards.
You should learn to play those.
Let me tell you, it was like everything in me not to buy.
I'm shocked that you're not showing me these right now.
You can buy them on Amazon for like $25.
They must have been over $30. That's why you don't have them.
No. No, you can get them on Amazon for like $25.
Yeah.
In fact, I will link to in the show notes. There's a wonderful YouTube video of Don Flemons teaching you how to hold and play the bones, this great old instrument that you don't really get anymore. And I will tell you what I really liked about it was I like this genre of cowboy music. It made me yearn for going out west. And one of my favorite songs that Don Flemons plays is called Lone Ranger. And what it's based on is the life of the first black deputy U.S. Marshal. And his name is Bass Reeves. And he was a real U.S. Marshal out west in the Arkansas and Oklahoma territories. And, this was a name that was like kind of lost to time until Dom Flemons bought it back. So it was a very cool way to kind of connect to that part of the country. It reminded me of going to Badlands National Park. You could really get this idea of a huge expanse and sort of these lone cowboys trotting along, on their steeds.
Cowboys on their steeds sounds like my kind of evening. We should head over to
Flaming Saddles.
Flaming Saddles one night. Get your tickets in. Yeah.
One of our favorite establishments in Hell's Kitchen. Ryan, we are so lucky. Christmas is on a Tuesday.
I mean, it is like Providence is saying, give these folks what they want, a Christmas episode of Out of Office.
I mean, I think maybe nothing's going to be stirring, not even a mouse, except for your earbuds, because we are downloading. What time do we usually download? 4 a.m.?
4 a.m.
Absolutely. So if you can't sleep because you're waiting up for Santa, we're going to give you something to get through those last few hours before you can go downstairs.
Santa's going to be binging on Out of Office all night while he is going around on his play, waiting for that new episode.
So he'll catch up on the first 10. Next week marks our first annual Christmas episode where we're going to give you the gift of the tagline, and we're going to have some other special treats for you.
Yeah, tune in. Spend your Christmas with us and not your family. Or in addition to your family. Spend your Christmas with us, your real family, here on Out of Office.
After 12 episodes, we already feel like a family. Also, Ryan, people should, one gift they could give themselves is following us on Instagram, where we are at OOO Podcast.
At OOO Podcast. Check out the Insta. We are pushing some good content on there.
Well, I wouldn't say pushing
holiday
because that
season.
sounds like drugs. But we
sharing.
are regularly posting with our listeners pictures to do with the topic that we talk about that week.
Until next week, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Santa Claus.
We are Out of Office.
Ho, ho, ho. A travel podcast.
Adventure in your ear.